So you all want to take Jubilee photographs. Becky and I are going to just picture this at a sort of beginner's basic level, because we don't really know what your expectations are, what sort of needs you have. So do chip in as we go along on the presentation, and it's quite a generic photograph course that you can apply to lots of situations, I'm sure, in the future.
That's what I thought.
And you may know it all and think, oh, I didn't need to do that, or you may pick up a few tips. We'll see how we get on. Before we go any further, I'm going to just forget photography and put my other hat on and say, please do let us know about your events. If you email me, we can advertise them for you on we have a website called Angels and Pinnacles that you may or may not know about. And that website is linked to all the tourist board activity online. So it's just quite a good one to advertise your events for, sort of more community events, and where you might draw people in from a bigger, wider audience. And that can be quite useful for you to put your events on. My colleague Lauren puts all the events on for you, and it gets quite a lot of footfall and traffic, so you might pick up new people from that. So it's quite useful information to know. So let me introduce myself. Welcome to our training session on photography. I am Leonie Ryle. I am the Diocesan Communications Manager. I've been here about, I think it's coming up to 5 years, which I can't believe, but I have. And my whole background has been marketing consultancies, agencies. So what I'm trying to say is I'm not a photographer. I've worked with photographers and worked with design and using photography in my job. So I have an awareness of what looks right in brochures and PR and what we're looking for, but I'm not an expert photographer, but I give it a go. And I think that's part of the reason why we're all here. You just sometimes have to give things a go. And hopefully some of the tips we'll give you in this session will help you on that, help you with that as well. Becky.
Hi, I'm Becky. So I head up the communications for Lightwave. So I'm in charge of the social media. I take a lot of photos and record videos, and we share stories on our website and on our social media. But I also have a bit of a background in photography. So I did photography at school, and then studied visual communication at university. So I did a bit of photography with film and illustration as well. And I work part-time as a wedding photographer when I get the opportunity. So it's something that I'm really interested in and love that I get to use it as part of this job.
So it's really nice. We work together quite often. We sometimes have done joint videos. Becky sometimes borrows my children, and we've collaborated on this, and Becky's just done a lot of design work for us at the Diocesan office on our brochures, so it's working really well. So we thought a basic guide to photography might help. We're not going to go through things in a load of detail because you can always email us afterwards, and we didn't want to sort of use up too much of your time, but we're basically just going to talk about a bit of basic kit, different scenarios, some general information, photography that might work for PR purposes, a few bits of safeguarding around permissions, and then the sort of where you can share your photographs at the end. I think we'll start with a little bit of a question for you, if we may, is what would you say makes a great photograph? What photographs have you seen that you think, oh, that's brilliant, but why do you think that? So have anybody got any good ideas on that?
Sometimes they just happen, because I went into our church early one morning in February, and we've got some of those perspex figures from, the First World War celebrations.
Yes.
And I stood at the back of the church and took a picture of sort of an angle, and the light was coming in, hitting one of these figures, and it cast an image of it above the pulpit. So it looked as if there was a phantom figure.
Wow. Oh, wow.
So I think sometimes happenstance makes for a good photo, and being prepared to seize on the day.
Mm-hmm.
I started my amateur photography career, if you like, with wet film. So I took pictures, and you didn't see the result for weeks, if not months, or even years, I'm ashamed to say, with underwater films or something like that. So I was very pleased to get results that were got the contrast, the light right, and in focus. Life is so much easier these days with digital, where you can instantly see and dump what's not very good. And that is a huge boon. But I think it depends what you're trying to achieve with your photograph. Why are you taking the picture? Are you recording something for posterity? Or are you trying to record an event and try and pick up the character of the event, that people enjoying themselves, all that sort of thing? Once you get people or even animals in your photograph, you've got a lot more uncontrollable factors, I think.
Yes, everyone blinks, don't they? Right at that crucial moment.
Yeah.
So we came up with a few lists, didn't we, Becky? Do you want to just go through those?
Yeah, so I guess other than the obvious, capturing a moment, capturing an emotion or something interesting, the kind of logistics and the technicalities of getting a good photo, good clear lighting, and we will go over each of these things in more detail anyway, but making sure your area isn't too bright or too dark, and checking for shadows,
squinting eyes in the sun, that's always a good one.
Yeah, making sure your subject is in focus, and this could be down to your photo taking, or it could be you're trying to capture something that's moving, or you have a bit of a shaky hand. I know I have a shaky hand, so we've got a few tips for that as well. Just checking the background, making sure things are staged well, not overcomplicated in the background, and also just being aware of your surroundings, because people can be doing funny things in the background that you don't realize until you look back at a later date, and then you have to crop things out, and that just gets complicated. So just being aware of what's going on behind the subject is important as well, I think. And good composition, making sure you leave enough space around your photos. I think it's very easy to zoom in and get the shot, and then you get home and you realize you've cropped the top of somebody's head off, or a hand
their
or
feet
a
off.
limb.
We get a lot of photographs where you've got a nice picture of a posed photograph, and then everyone's got their feet chopped off. That's quite common.
Yeah, so just giving yourself room to kind of edit it down if needed.
So talking about basic kit, I mean, I have to be honest and say my daughter's mobile phone is far better than my actual camera these days. And I don't know whether that's true for you, or whether you're using a camera or whether you're using a mobile phone. I don't know. What are you using?
I'm using phone again. My phone's better than the cameras I've bought in the past, which were quite decent at the time. But
I know it's frustrating, isn't it? But phones are certainly of the moment, and everyone's, they're handy, they're in your pocket. It means when you can walk into that church unexpected and see that light, you can take an instant photo. You do a bit of both, don't you?
I do. I tend to go more for my phone. For me, if I'm at work, I use my camera, but it depends on what you're using the end photo for. If they're just going on social media or on your website, phones are normally fine. If you're planning to blow the photo up on a large scale, a phone photo won't do that. As clear as it is in the phone itself, they just don't blow up very nicely. So if you're looking for something large scale, then a decent camera would serve you better. But I mean, I went on holiday a couple of weeks ago. I took 4 photos on my camera, and embarrassingly about 8,000 on my phone. So
that's quite impressive. 8,000.
A lot to go through, but it's a convenience thing as much as anything. And if you know that they're just going to be shared on Facebook, or like I say, on the website, and they're going to be quite small scale, then most of the time the phone will do the job.
I sometimes use this iPad for photos as well, because sometimes with an iPad you don't do the cropping off feet as much. Personally, I find I don't crop feet off as much with the iPad as I do with the phone.
Yeah, I guess because you can see it bigger as you take it, can't you? So
yeah, I wouldn't know how to take a photograph with a phone. We've got one that takes pictures, but I've no idea how to get them off it because it's not a smartphone. I have got quite an old now digital camera which takes super photographs, but it's such a faff to download it onto the computer. I'm with Pam. Was it Pam? I think who said iPad. iPad is so convenient. You know, I can take a picture, I can instantly email it to my computer, email it to anyone I want to, very, very, very quickly. So I use the iPad lots and lots now.
And I think you're right. You have to get you find something that works for you, and you stick with that. And they're all getting so good quality now that you'll probably be fine with your iPads and your mobile phones or whatever you've got. One of the things that we do recommend though is a bit of supporting kit, a good old tripod. So we have this one, which is a little one. This is great for a mobile phone. I don't know whether you've got them or whether you've seen them. These are really cheap on online. The great thing about this one, it's got little movable feet. I don't know whether you can see that. I've attached mine and then wrapped it round a gate post and then moved this round. And I left it there to take photographs because I wanted a bird on a water butt. And I left the camera there so they got used to the camera, and then I just nipped over and took it without them noticing it. Or you can just do great things with these, and they just give you that little bit of stability. So I would recommend these. I think I paid £10 for this. They don't last long. They do have a habit of falling apart eventually, but they just clasp your mobile phone.
What make is it, may I ask? Is it?
Oh, there's hundreds.
You know, you can spend ages looking, can't you? And then.
You know what? I just bought whatever came up top on.
So as long as you kind of say adjustable or movable legs or whatever.
Yeah, movable legs. And I have bought a couple of different ones. My other one's a little tiny bit bigger than this, but they're great. They fit in my bag. I don't have to worry. Versus, you know, your traditional, one of these. And I mean, this one's a camera one, but you can get these for mobile with the mobile phone attachment. This is a full height one, all the little legs telescope out. But the stability it offers is obviously really important. And if you're doing stage photography, definitely recommend a tripod. Did you have anything else you wanted to add?
Yeah, I was just going to say that you can get, I mean, I've got a tripod. Well, it's actually technically a music stand for when I sing at church. I have my iPad on a little telescopic stand, but something like that, I think it cost me £8, would work as a tripod as well for an iPad. But I was just thinking that we could probably put together a bit of a kit list if that would be helpful, and we could send out some options for you. I just bought a tripod when we went away, and it was similar to that, so it goes very, very tall, but we had a weight limit on our suitcase, so I found a really lightweight one. And it also turns into a selfie stick if you need it. But that was really good, actually. We're really impressed with it, so we can send a few links out after the call. That's helpful.
Well, thank you.
The other thing about having a tripod, it means you can set up the shot and set your camera or phone to have a timer. Just gives you that little bit of space. Timers are quite handy. I use them on my mobile phone sometimes to have that countdown to take the shot. That's a good idea.
It's not just for you like running into the photo, because that's always what it is in my family. We set up the shot and then dad runs into the back, but I find it really helpful to set up the timer because it's so easy to jog the tripod or kind of shake. So if I just put a 3-second timer on, you can just press it, stand back, and you know you're going to get a nice steady shot. And you can also just sort of look back at the wider group and just check that everything's okay, step back from it.
Now the settings, because I'm not a photographer, I'm one of those people that leaves my camera in the standard settings. Standard, click, excellent, lovely. But you're a bit more sophisticated, aren't you?
Sometimes. I mean, I do just whack it on auto as well, because auto's really good these days and you don't really need to do very much. On phones, there are a few inbuilt settings that you can play around with. I mean, I use my iPhone, but it should be the same as an iPad. There's a little arrow at the top and you can go through and you can adjust your exposure. You can kind of tap the screen, and I don't know if you can see.
I'm just going to make you bigger.
Oh no, don't do that. If you tap it and slide up and down, can you see how it's affecting the brightness?
Yeah.
That's just a really simple trick. If you're if you literally just want to brighten it slightly. But mostly the iPhone, the iPad will be good at adjusting to light. Obviously, there's a huge amount of detail you can go into with cameras, exposure, aperture, f-stops, all sorts of things. And I would be happy to give more advice on that if anybody wanted to go through that. So just drop me an email if that's something I can help with. But I think we'll just keep it pretty simple for now, won't we?
Yes, so don't forget the options to turn on and off the flash if you need it. And there are opportunities to edit your photos afterwards. We haven't gone into the editing side afterwards, but loads of the iPads and iPhones and Android versions give you options to do filters and different things afterwards, which can change the look of your photograph. So
yeah, if you simply click edit from the photo gallery, you can adjust the three main things that I would probably adjust on a photo would be the brightness, because it's very easy to get them a little bit too bright or a little bit too dark. So just playing around with that. The contrast, which just makes it a little bit more vibrant and
poppy.
Yeah. A little bit more
sharp, isn't it?
Yeah. And then the saturation, because I often find that photos that I see that people have taken can sometimes just look a little bit dull. And so just sliding the saturation up a tiny bit just brings the color and makes it pop. And going back to the settings, Leonie said about the flash, I would advise not using the flash. Obviously there is an option, and if you have to use the flash, then that's fine. But if you can, and you've got the option, go to a light source, go to a window or outside, just because flash is just a bit temperamental, especially if you've got people with glasses, you get reflections. So yeah, use it if you have to, but
we always say, don't we, especially in our darker churches, and they are quite dark, some of them, is go outside because you'll get a better shot. Because they tend to be quite either shadowy or just dark in general, so outside is often better.
Yeah,
but sometimes you have no choice.
No, exactly.
I just was going to ask Becky, for my own benefit, is it better to zoom in to take the shot or take the shot and zoom in afterwards?
I would say take the shot and zoom in afterwards, but again, my advice would be to get as close to your subject as you can as possible. So move yourself to the subject, because I think that's the one thing that I found that really lets down phone cameras is the inbuilt zoom. As soon as you start to pinch and zoom on the screen, that's where you lose all of the quality, even just one tiny zoom. So move yourself if possible. And then I think it tends to be a little bit better if you've got a nice crisp photo and then you crop it down afterwards, it tends to keep a little bit more of the quality.
Yeah, so and sometimes it can be, you take a lovely shot of a group, but when you get home, you only want one person. So I always do that cropping afterwards rather than trying to crop that person at the time. I would do it afterwards. So do we have any questions about just sort of the basic kit? No?
Just one question about the use of flash, particularly in a dark church.
Yeah.
Problem I've found is that the flash has got a limited range, so it will illuminate what's in the foreground, but everything behind that then is darker, if anything.
Yeah, that can be, I think it can just completely change a photo. And I think flash is very temperamental, and because you can't control it, so I will use a flash if I'm photographing a wedding. I'll use a flash, but I often have a diffuser on it, so it kind of softens the light, and phones just don't really have that capability. Something that I have sometimes done, which it's a bit more complicated, but for example, when we were photographing the doorstep carols and it was really dark outside, I had a phone and I turned my torch on, and then I took photos with another camera or another phone, and then I could control the light a bit more. So it's a bit more fiddly, but you could try something like that, especially if you've got your phone already on a tripod. You could then use somebody else's phone to kind of bounce some light around. But I honestly think the easiest thing is just to head outside where possible.
You can buy, I've got them for when I go out filming people. It's a little, you can buy them online, and I'd have to,
ring light.
It's a little ring, and it's like a fluorescent light. I don't think it is, but it's a light,
Yeah,
obviously you have to plug it in, and you can use that, and I use that sometimes when you're standing in a church window, so you've got the light coming in at one side, and I use this little portable light on the other side to balance it out. I mean, if you were like with a photographer with full amounts of kit, you'd have bounce balls and everything, but you know, we don't expect, we don't have that kit, so we do the best with what we can. But these little ring lights are just quite handy to have, and I've got one for work. Put it on if we do a little list at the end, I'll add it on there. Mine's very old, I would say that.
They can attach to tripods and phones now, because I think they've been rebranded as a selfie light as well.
Well, they have
lots
actually,
of young people
and
using
it's
them.
funny because I think when Bishop Martin and Bishop Mike do their vlogs, I think one of them, they have a light in the front of them, and it sits in front of the computer when they're doing their vlogs, and it shines back. Certainly some of them, sometimes they have that, and it takes out, it gives them a better profile when they're recording, and better coverage. So if they use it, then
just with any light at all, like I said before, the thing is just to be aware of reflections, particularly with the ring lights. You can get the reflections in the glasses, but sometimes that's what's going to happen to get a slightly better photo.
So I think you mentioned right at the beginning, Dave, it depends what you're taking your photograph for. And often we're taking them for PR, for social media, for printed materials, but you're possibly using them for all of those reasons, I would imagine, aren't you?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I think we know usually what our photographs are for, but obviously we also have to be sensitive to what we're photographing as well. So we're doing a piece at the end about permissions, but it's just important. I went recently to film and photograph a Christingle service, and it was absolutely lovely. It was dark, it was wintry, the lighting was a nightmare, but it created that bit of atmosphere. But you want to, they knew I was coming, they knew I was taking photographs, and Becky kindly lent me her camera. So they know that you're there to take photographs, and they'd all agreed up front, but you don't want to interrupt or distract people from what they're there for. And you don't want to be too intrusive for the private moments. So I just tried to be sensitive to not being completely in the way. I mean, you must do this for wedding photography as well, but on the other hand, I was there to do a job, and they wanted me to take the photographs. So it's a bit of a balancing act. It's about being sensitive to people's needs, and just taking care of how people might respond to you. Some people love being in a photo, but you can tend to sense if somebody doesn't want to be part of the photograph, and then you can discreetly move on. Whereas you've got some people going, yeah, take me. So it's just a little bit of a note about being sensitive to that.
Yeah, I think I always find it easier to, so like with this call, we let you all know at the start that we're going to be recording it, and I think the same goes for photography, really, to let people know as they arrive at your event that people are going to be taking photos, and giving people the option to opt out. And a couple of things that I jotted down as suggestions would be to have a little notebook with you, or just take notes on your phone. If somebody says they don't want to be photographed, write down what they're wearing and what they look like, so you can happily snap away, obviously not intentionally photographing them, but then when you look back at the photos, you can just make sure that person doesn't appear in what you share. Or you could buy yourself a very cheap packet of stickers and put a sticker on the person that doesn't want to be photographed, just so that you're aware of them, and respecting that wish not to be in photos. And something that I often do, if I find a family or a group of people that I know are happy to be photographed, I will just follow them round, and I'll get close-ups and shots further away with these groups and lots of different angles, because you're not gonna want thousands of photos of the same event. So a couple of shots of a few willing volunteers is fine, but you might contact people in advance. If I know that I'm going to meet with the group, I'll sometimes email ahead and say, is there anyone who's happy to be photographed? And it just kind of takes the pressure off you as well.
Yeah, and they're expecting you there, and they know they're part of it. And some people love that, so that works really well. And we've both done that, actually, haven't we? So shall we move on to some examples? I think we've divided this into two: stage photos and then sort of candid photographs. So stage photos can be a bit more managed.
With stage photos, you have a bit more freedom that you can create a moment. I know these photos are very kind of standard, stand and smile, but you can recreate a moment that you might have missed. So the example that I wrote down, the first kiss at a wedding, that's always the photo that you want to capture and you can't miss it. So another tip that I was going to say was that on your phone or iPad, you can record and you can take photos at the same time now if you've got the latest update, and then you can go back and you can take a screenshot, and that way you don't miss any moments. So I found that really helpful. But sorry, going back to the stage photos, if you do miss that key moment, you can recreate it. You can set up your tripod in the corner and you can grab the people that you want to photograph and you can kind of direct them, and you can get that classic standing and smiling shot, which is great. But you can also have a chat to them and make them laugh and
make them feel comfortable.
Yeah, a bit more relaxed.
And as I think you can see really from these photographs, it's how you position them. And we tend to try and put the tallest person in the middle to make a little triangle. If you can, I mean, you can certainly see that in the bottom photograph with Bishop Mike in it. We put the tallest person in the middle. It just creates a better composition, and obviously you're going to put the tallest people at the back and short ones at the front. I have to say the biggest thing is think about the surroundings, tidy up. I did a photo shoot years and years ago and then got terribly told off by my boss at the time because I'd left a rubbish bin full of rubbish on the left. I didn't even notice the rubbish bin, but there it was in every photograph. So don't be afraid to move things. Check that there's not a candlestick sticking out of their head or their shoulder. Move people around. And the other thing that I've done recently is take that head-on shot, like we've got the example here, but also do it from the side, like really that top one on the left. So you get them at a very slightly different angle, and then when you get back and you look at them both, you can choose which one looks the most effective.
Get ready to take a few different photos because, like we mentioned before, people will always blink or talk. A lot of people talk because they get nervous having their photo taken and they just chat away, and it's infuriating. You just want them to smile. But someone will always be pulling a funny face. So take a few shots. Again, just check for reflections, check your lighting, and just take it slowly as well. Don't rush to get the photo. People don't mind if they've already agreed that they're going to have their photo taken. They're happy to pose. So take time, don't rush through it, and make sure you get the shot that you want.
So I love this type of photography. If I'm honest, this is the photography that I would have over a posed shot.
Me too.
Not always easy to do, and people tend to move quite quickly, especially children. They move around very quickly and it's quite hard to catch them. So my advice here is take as many photographs as you can and then delete a load at the end.
Yeah.
But I love this style of photography.
Yeah. Going back to what I said about taking videos as well, that works really well for this kind of photography. That top photo of the children having a water fight is a screenshot of a video because they were just moving really fast, so quite difficult to get as a photograph. But I took a little video of them running, and then I went through and I just paused it on the bit that I wanted and took a screenshot, so that worked really well.
I think for me, what these type of photographs bring out, particularly in our communities and our church members, is that our focus should be the people. And I think this style of photography really brings that to light, the just catching, and sometimes it's by accident and sometimes it's on purpose, but you can just catch a smile or a look or a natural pose, and I just think they do express what we're looking for in the photographs that we need, which is that sometimes the joy and happiness of being in church, and this is the way to do it rather than through posed pictures.
Something a little bit more nerdy. So when you're in lower light, because the lens of a camera is built to let light in, when you're in lower light, the lens wants to let in more light so it will open for longer, which means that your photo might be taken over a second rather than a fraction of a second. Therefore, you will get more blur in low light. So all of these photos, for example, apart from the one in the bottom corner, which is nicely lit anyway, we're all outside. So if you're getting photos of people moving around, anything action-based, always better to go outside, because the camera will just react a lot faster. The lens will automatically open and shut quicker, and you'll get sharper images.
So some other things, obviously you're trying to focus on one person, you want faces, so the one in the middle where you've got the back of somebody's head but you've got the person's face standing next to them.
Focus,
so he's your focus. He's sometimes trying to pull out the quirkiness of something, and you know, the action, and I think these photos are fabulous, and it always makes me very happy when I receive photographs like this.
Yeah, that's the kind of photos that people prefer to see on social media, people having fun, real life, real emotion.
Obviously, we're often taking pictures in churches, and although it can be quite tricky, it's much better to get people's faces in the backs of heads. I get an awful lot of photographs with the pews with the backs of people's heads, and it's really hard as a photographer to get round the front and sort of start getting in people's way to take their faces, but sometimes you just have to do it. And I mean, I was incredibly lucky at my Christingle service that these little children were absolutely brilliant and loved the camera, and it can be quite difficult, but it is worth trying to get people's faces, and I think that's all we need to say there.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a confidence thing. I think you're more aware of yourself walking around people than everyone else is. Obviously, you don't want to get in people's faces and you don't want to be intrusive, but positioning yourself to get the right shot, it just takes a bit of confidence.
So although these are all lovely photographs, we obviously prefer to have busy full photographs of churches rather than empty pews. And sometimes you need it. We do take architectural style photos for various different reasons. Church buildings like to have pictures of church buildings, but I like pictures for my needs as a communications manager of people. And in this instance, a big full church, I know it's all the backs of their heads, but they're active and it's a busy church. It looks active and alive. Yes, it's great to have the fronts of faces, but it's far better to have people in them than no people. That would be my main point about that. And you had some suggestions about seating. If you've only got a handful in a big empty church, sit them all together, ask them to be in a smaller space, and then you get that shot where it looks, you're sort of faking the busyness, really, aren't you? But that works if you need to put them together.
This was just what we already touched upon earlier, just making sure that you manually move yourself closer to the subject where possible rather than zooming in. So those two photos were just taken a couple of seconds apart, and I just moved myself a few steps forward, and it makes a huge amount of difference, because obviously not only is Ben in the photo a lot clearer, but it's got rid of the chairs and the rug.
Yes, I just wanted to touch on this. It's great to have lovely photographs of people and the focus that you're looking for, but sometimes in design, if you're producing a brochure, it's really handy to have some small sort of additional shots that might say the atmosphere, create a feel for a whole event. I mean, we've just put some examples on there. This is where close-up shots can be really handy, and if you imagine these on a brochure, if you were advertising a Christmas event, you'd have the lovely picture of the children at the top, and you could have a couple of little shots of underneath of bringing something a different thought or thinking into that shot. So really think that a variety of shots can be helpful if you're creating brochures and adverts and social media posts.
I think with the Jubilee photos as well, there's going to be lots of lovely decorations and lots of colour. Yeah, so just look for those details.
And I think you touched on this earlier, Nan, when you mentioned that photograph. I immediately thought of this slide. You mentioned that photograph with the light shining in right at the beginning and seeing a shadow. Quirkiness, unusual features is definitely something to look for. I love these selection photos. I mean, that's an Ipswich skyline that I didn't even know existed until I was sent that photo. And just crouching on the ground with those daisies, it's just unusual angles. It's just a little bit of something. I mean, sometimes with a mobile phone you can get that shot. Oh, look, there's a rainbow. I'll take that now.
Yeah.
Just gives it something a little bit special, doesn't it?
And having fun with your camera as well. I was taking some pictures on the beach and I turned my phone upside down so that the camera was like right next to the sand, and then took the photo. And then when I put my phone up the right way around and it rotated, it was completely different and so much more interesting because it had all of the sand grains in focus and the shells, and then the sea was the background. So just play around, have some fun with it. I feel like if you're enjoying the creative process, then
lots of things just happen, hopefully.
Yeah. And look for reflections as well. They can be quite good. Puddles, windows, like seeing bunting reflected in the church window would be really cool.
Oh, I'm going to expect that job now.
10 points if you get that one.
So I just wanted to mention, obviously my job here at the diocese is often about PR. I always thought in the olden days we'd send one big picture off to your media, but we tend to send off 3 or 4 photographs out with a press release. Sometimes the media or the newspaper are looking for space to fill, and they don't want it to be filled with words, they want it to be filled with lovely photographs. Particularly important where media nowadays is putting your press releases online as well as in print, because online they will use your photographs more than one photograph. So we tend to now supply 3 or 4 good photographs with our press releases. We provide them with the captions on the photo so they know who's in them. We only ever use children's first names. We don't put surnames or any other details about them on it. And we get permissions from the paper. And we also supply them with the credit of the photographer, so that the paper knows who's taken the photograph, because they will print that information. So I've got a couple of examples. I think this was a press release for Red Lodge. It was about a youth crime project that she was working on, and we supplied these 3 different photographs, and the paper used them all, I think. And they used the picture of the lead on the project, Diane, on the left hand side, as a little tiny hero shot on the paper, and they used the other 2 around it, and it gave them choice. Papers like to have that ability to choose, and you're making it really easy for them by giving them choice, for them to use your story. And they may only use one, they may use bits of one, or they may use all 3. So it's just nice to give them that choice. And just out of interest, media do actually quite like a video as well, because it's often online, and they love a video over a photograph. So I think we got another example here of a press release recently that we did for a food bank, and we provided them with 3 different photographs. All of these people were mentioned in the press release, and then the little detailed icons shot of the food. It just brings it to life. It gives the paper options about what they may or may not want to put out in that press release. So it's just a good idea. I don't know if any of you are doing that type of press for local media, but they will love your stories if they've got people in them and a good photograph. Anything that you might want to put out locally about the numbers of attending events or projects that you're doing, it's always worth sending in a press release, a couple of paragraphs about what you've been doing, good photographs, and also invite the press to your events. You never know, a photographer might turn up. If they've got a slow news day, they may use all of your photographs. And it just depends. I mean, so occasionally we'll get the media ring us up saying we haven't got much to fill the paper. Have you got anything? They are looking for stories. They don't have banks and banks of journalists anymore. So they're looking for people like you to send them very happy, feel-good factor stories to fill their pages. Always worth doing. So I just thought I'd put that in here today. And then obviously the boring part, but the most necessary part, safeguarding. I'm not going to read all this out, so I will email this to you separately, but really ask for consent is mainly the basic message here. It's really important that people in your photographs you've got permissions for them to be in your photographs, videos. The church, I mean, when I did the Christingle service at Thorndon Church, the vicar had already arranged all the consent forms. Everybody had signed up with consent forms. We recommend you do that every 3 years. But new visitors should be asked to consent to be part of your photographs. So when I do photographs, I tend to send them back to the vicar and say, are you happy that we've got consent for all of these people to be in my PR piece? If people don't want to be part of it, do give them an area to sit in the church where you're definitely not going to photograph. Or as Becky said earlier, you can give people little, we had a youth event recently and we gave them wristbands, so I knew not to photograph them. We have a duty to do that. Part of GDPR is that we have to get consent over using photography. It's important to say that even photographs that you might think you can use from the internet, please check you've got the permissions to use them first.
I think it's worth remembering that it's not always about people just not liking their photos taken. Sometimes it's a safety thing as well. And when you think about it like that, I think it's easier to remember how careful you need to be.
So yes, we do suggest you get consent from adults, but children are a different category again. Anybody under the age of 16 needs to have consent from their parent or guardian. All the same guidelines apply. But we recommend that children between 13 and 16 are asked for their permission personally, as well as their parents. This is really important. You have to be 13 to have your own social media accounts. A child who's 13 can make their own decisions about photographs going online. And as a parent of a 13-year-old myself, I know he doesn't want me to photograph him and put them on my Facebook page, and I have to honour his opinions on that. And it's important that they have the right to do that. So if they're over 13, do ask the child as well as their parents, because I as a parent might say yes, but my child who's 13 might say no, and it's their right to do that. There is a permission form on our website that you can download. It's under the safeguarding section. I can email it to you if you want. The form is adaptable really, so it's just a recommendation and you can copy and paste the bits you want and need for your setting and what you're using your photographs for. That's just a little bit of detail about if you were filming a church service, you wouldn't necessarily choose to film communion, but if you can, you must have consent. And so a little bit more techniques of how to do that, but I think it's all on. I shall email it to you separately because it's a bit wordy.
Yeah, the last bit was just about sharing your photos. You might all have Facebook and Instagram pages already, and if you are going to share the photos from the Jubilee weekend on there, then we'd love you to use the hashtag that's on screen at the moment, Suffolk Blessing, and then we can see the photos as well by searching that hashtag. But we also have a Facebook page that we've created specifically for that weekend, which is called Suffolk Blessing Queen's Jubilee. And again, in the email that we send out after this call with the kit recommendations, we could send you the link to that as well. And if you've got permission, then we'd love to see the photos and any videos shared on there.
And I think that's really nice. And there'll be plenty of people looking for social media links about your events. There's lots of places you can advertise them on. You can advertise them on your own social media. You can advertise your events on our Angels and Pinnacles website. Use our Facebook page, and then you're basically telling each other what's going on. There is the Festival of Suffolk, which is the Suffolk Jubilee Response campaign. They've got events advertising on their website as well. But beyond the Jubilee, use your PR, use your social media, you've got websites, and get your photographs out there and have a go. That's what I would say. That's our last slide. I hope we haven't bored you to death, and I hope we've stuck to time because I haven't got a clock. But I hope it was helpful for you. As I said at the beginning, we didn't really know, we've not done this before, so it's a first off. Is it a one-off? We will find out. We didn't know where to pitch it, so I'd really appreciate your feedback, either now or you can email me later, whether you'd like a more advanced course or actually whether you'd like any other marketing course in terms of help and support. So just let us know. And Dave, you got some feedback straight away.
Well, not so much feedback. I think it's very useful. Thank you. A good reminder for all of us. I just wanted to add something. Perhaps you covered it and I had a microsleep, but when you're going for unique photographs, look for unique places to take them from.
Yes, that's a very
you
good
covered
point.
that.
We didn't cover that, but I've just had a go at that because I was at an Eye Castle, which is really, really high, and it looks down on Eye Church, which is a big church. And it was a really unusual photograph purely because I was in a different place. So good point.
Yeah, well, I mean, what I was going to say is, every church has got a pulpit.
Yes.
If you can get up there and look down, on the congregation or on the concert audience or whatever, you may get a useful shot. And when there are things in or around the church like scaffolding that give you access to get a different perspective, use it. You know, if you go on the tower, the church roof, or up the tower, use those opportunities to take pictures of things from a different angle.
Yeah, good idea. Church near you have got a lot of resources. If you're an editor and you can get to that resource hub, there's a lot of photography for the Jubilee. You can obviously advertise all your events on the Jubilee there. It's a hugely beneficial website to use. It's the first, if you Google a church, it will always be the first one that comes up. And it's something huge, the amount of hits that they get every year of people going to look for a church. So if you've got your Jubilee events to advertise, I would have a look at making sure you can tag your events Jubilee in the same way that you can tab your events Christmas or Lent or Easter or whatever. And I know that they've put a resource bank on there, which I haven't actually looked at it, I'll be honest, but I think it includes pictures of the Queen and things like that you might be able to use. Might be quite handy. The reason we're doing this today is the diocese is putting together a training package. So I think today there was training on the parish giving scheme. There's been training on fundraising and grant applications, and another colleague is doing one on legacy. So we're doing more of these training, and I'm hoping that we'll do more of them. So do look out for them. Thank you all for coming. I hope it was useful. We will send you a little email in response to the things that have come up. Great, thank you for joining us.